Ambazonia Calling. News, analysis, commentary, opinion, editorials. Ambazonia Calling is a co-production of Africa Freedom Network, the Missions Tribune, and Compass Free Press. Welcome. My name is Ntumfoyn Herbert, and I bring you revolutionary greetings from our studios in Washington, D.C. to all of you, friends of Ambazonia and fellow Ambazonians on ground zero and across the globe. Today is the 23rd of September. It is exactly 1 year and 1 day since millions of Ambazonians flooded streets across the homeland in peaceful demonstrations showing overwhelming support for outright independence. Happy September 22nd, fellow Ambazonians. Sincere thanks to our fallen heroes, to our leaders and heroes in jails and dungeons, to our people on ground zero who face indignities on a daily basis. Freedom is indeed coming to Ambazonia, no matter how hard the colonizers fight to delay it. One of the most senior officials of the International Criminal Court has finally said the only word that adequately describes the crime that has been unfolding in Ambazonia for more than a year now. It is genocide, according to the International Criminal Court.
And they're asking whether the situation of southern Cameroon.
Oh, it's extremely very, very bad now. It's a genocide indeed.
We will have that very important piece of information later in this program, but we will begin now, as we do on most of our programs, with our news wrap-up for the week. Here's Innocent here with the first of the two news wrap-up segments.
Visiting Ambazonians living in Obili, BMAC and Etukebe, predominantly Anglophone neighborhoods in La République du Cameroon's trash capital, Yaoundé, are in the eye of the storm.
Sessionists and terrorists are in Yaoundé, living with Anglophones in the areas like BMAC, Obili, and Etukebe.
According to a leaked memo issued September 17th by Joseph Béti-Assomo, La République du Cameroon's Minister Delegate of Defense at the presidency, there has been an influx of Ambazonians in these neighborhoods, and some, the memo says, are suspected of harboring plans to blow up infrastructure in Yaoundé.
Top military personnel to take stringent measures to neutralize any move from whosoever.
There is no doubt at Ambazonia Calling that the minister and his Nsingambeti warlords are hatching a plan for linguistic cleansing in Yaoundé.
It's not the first time that the government is placing such a surveillance order in Anglophone populated neighborhoods in the country. A similar move last year witnessed massive arrest of many people.
Dr. Cho Ayaba of the Ambazonia Governing Council and Ambazonia Defense Forces has responded to his critics following an unsavory prank by two idle minds in London.
Targeted diplomacy will mean nothing. Internationalization will mean absolutely nothing if we do not defend the land of our birth. I took one of the most risky missions to insert into the homeland, to show up our guys, to let them know we are not just asking them to fight, to take the risk. We were prepared to risk our lives also, to put our lives on the line for the interest of our homeland.
Blaise Nde, the Cameroon Protestant college teacher, shot and killed by forces of La République du Cameroon at a random police stop last Saturday in Bali in the northern zone, has been laid to rest.
A bloodthirsty officer called him back, asked him to stand on the stone wall. Put down your dresses. When I put down his pants, pulled his mask down, and opened fire on his legs. Blaise fell down. Some people who were already free tried to help him, and that officer told him, if you go there again, I will open fire on you. There are witnesses here.
At the funeral service Thursday 21st in the school chapel, where Blaise Nde had served in almost every capacity over the last 10 years, the principal of the school did not hold back, wondering what the school has done to deserve the ignominy.
When they had finished with those people, Blaise was still lying on the ground helpless. When the people left a few meters after, they heard the sound of the gun again. When we picked the corpse of Blaise to the mortuary, we saw bullet wounds on his chest. We now assume that that second gunshot was on his chest. Our assumption is that they knew that with the leg, the players will be able to give the testimony. Let us finish him. What have we done to you? Is it a price you have to pay us?
Amnesty International is urging La République du Cameroon to ensure accountability for human rights violations and abuses committed by forces of the government. According to the 20th September 2018 report, Cameroon has agreed, among other things, to grant detainees access to their lawyers and to stop unwarranted arrests. Observers note Cameroon is master at agreeing to international conventions before breaking them. Ambazonians currently attending the 39th General Session of the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva reported via social media Thursday 20th that human rights activist Agbon Kongo Bala is challenging bogus claims about dialogue made by La République du Cameroon. Meantime, a top former U.S. official has tweeted what many Ambazonians see as a most hopeful sign. On Tuesday 18th, Herman Cohen tweeted, quote, "Time is running out for the Cameroon government in the Anglophone regions. Return to the pre-1972 federation within 1 year or face total secession into Ambazonia." End quote. Herman Cohen has served as United States Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs from 1989 to 1993, brokered an end to the Eritrean-Ethiopian War in 1991, as well as conflicts in Angola and Mozambique. The ADF has revealed intelligence that a gang of armed robbers purporting to be Amber Boys are preparing to attack and kill Bororo community members at Takwi in Kum local government area, Butte County in the northern zone. And in foreign news, the European Union has decided that it will not be sending observers to monitor Cameroon's upcoming presidential elections on October 7th. It is a first since 1990 and has been criticized by some of the presidential hopefuls. The decision comes amid heightened insecurity in Cameroon and an ongoing war against southern Cameroon restorationists. Innocent Chia, Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
We will stick with Innocent Chia for the second part of our news wrap-up for this week.
A travel ban issued at the beginning of the week by La République du Cameroon's Northwest Delegate for Transportation has been revoked after the AGC returned the favor, asking that all citizens of La République du Cameroon not currently residing in Ambazonia obtain a pass and justify what is taking them to Ambazonia. A leading self-defense soldier of Ambazonia's revolution, General Ivo, has doubled down on plans to enforce a zero movement in Ambazonia beginning Tuesday, September 25th, arguing that without La République du Cameroon presidential campaigns in Ambazonia, there can be no elections.
So na fraud, na me General Ivo they talk na fraud. Not like their own program, say the groups that don't stand. Move balance ourselves down here, forget about them. If now they write this in the concern of them, if now they do the propaganda them, no campaign no spoke for whole. We don't already die we, they only kiki we. We'll continue, they need die, they for update. When they adjust, they'll come meet us, we know now who go meet them.
His call more than puts a wrinkle in the volatile situation, even as the ensemble of restoration groups in the diaspora agreed midweek for a zero movement to begin on October 1st. In another video gone viral on social media, Dr. Ebenezer Akwanga, leader of the Southern Cameroon's Youth League and SOCODEF, worried about an ill-conceived county-by-county defense strategy that has been embraced along tribal lines.
We are not going to prosecute guerrilla warfare on the basis of county by county, on the basis of tribalism. That is not going to happen. We will not allow ourselves to create a difficult situation where it will become so difficult to disarm each one of us. We are not going to create tribal militias. It will never happen. Not in the Ambazonia which we have been fighting for all these years. That is not going to work. We will not, at this hour of our history, knowingly create a situation worse than that in South Sudan.
It is a point echoed by a leader of the Ambazonian forces in BOYO, aka General RK, speaking about the makeup of his selfless volunteers.
The army is getting close to 2,000 soldiers. And if you ask me how we have been managing to cope with the situation on ground, the answer is also simple. Our people, our parents, mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, they have been the ones supplying all our needs.
The Ndop Bridge at Bamali, northern zone of Ambazonia, has been cut off by unknown forces. The ADF has reported that it is investigating an act of arson that left multiple persons with severe fire injuries in Bessie, southern zone. In a great humanitarian gesture, the ADF is currently absorbing the cost to treatment. Sources of the fire remain unknown. Stay tuned for more stories that made your news through the week. You are listening to Ambazonia Calling.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
Still ahead in this edition, we have The Devil Unmasked with Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta. We have a winner for the Nyamfuka of the Week. And we are not done until we have heard our letter to Joshua. So stay tuned, kick back, relax, and enjoy Ambazonia Calling. As we said at the top of this broadcast, one of the most senior officials at the International Criminal Court, as a matter of fact, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court based at The Hague in the Netherlands, Chief Barrister Charles Taku, has told reporters during a press briefing in Kampala, Uganda, that the mass killings that have been unfolding across Ambazonia for the last 1 year constitute genocide. Here is Chief Barrister Charles Taku in his own words.
So Chief, Cameroonians are watching you online and they're asking whether the situation of southern Cameroon.
Oh, it's extremely very bad now. It's a genocide indeed. In my own home, imagine they send soldiers to the chief's palace, destroy a lot of things, and that office, more than 130 towns in the southern Cameroon destroyed. It's a genocide, like civilians killed. I mean, it's unprecedented. It is a genocide happening in the southern Cameroon and the Gulf of Guinea. We are very embarrassed that the United Nations has not acted forcefully. Of course, African Union is totally silent. But whatever the case, the people are fighting on. They are defending themselves. And I think right now, the entire territory is locked down. The elections, the president organized elections, and the people of the southern Cameroon said the election will not take place in the territory. It is a matter of international law. It's a matter of people's right to exist. And I do not see exactly how there can be a military solution to that. In the first place, the military solution, apart from the crimes committed, I don't think they will win. One of the remarkable things about the southern Cameroon case is this. The Rohingyas jurisprudence that was given just a few weeks ago, where Myanmar, from Burma, deported thousands of refugees to Bangladesh, is going to apply here because Cameroon deported hundreds of thousands of southern Cameroon refugees to Nigeria from their ancestral home. They signed an order. They crossed the border and killed some. They went to Nigeria and adopted leaders of the southern Cameroons in a hotel with the complete Nigerian soldiers. Nigeria is a state party to the Rome Statute. And according to the Rohingyas jurisprudence, if you commit the crimes which fall under the jurisdiction of the ICC in a state party, then ICC has the jurisprudence to intervene. Indeed, ICC has a preliminary examination in Nigeria since 2010, and therefore they can appropriately look into these crimes. I can tell you, unfortunately, it's a genocide. The international community must do something now. The disgrace, what I've seen in other situations, where they wait and people are killed, and they use the conflict as a way of employing international civil servants to come and talk about justice, will no longer apply. We must give value to human life. The international community must intervene.
Ambazonia Calling will return in a moment to the scandal that is the United Nations refusing totally to protect the people of Ambazonia from genocidal violence. We will review the words of Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General, at the funeral of former Secretary General Kofi Annan 10 days ago in Ghana. We will also look at the historic declarations from Kofi Annan when he admitted guilt and all the excuses that the United Nations has provided, either under Guterres or under Kofi Annan, to not stepping in to protect genocide. But first, here is our editorial from Editorialist Lambenbaum.
We Ambazonians love quick fixes. We would much rather patch the tire than replace it. We have opted to improvise rather than put together an action plan and a roadmap. The last time this restoration quest had a plan was at the birth, or shall I say, the stillbirth of MORISC in January 2017. To its credit, the MORISC plan set the deadline of 1st October 2017 and mobilized worldwide support for bringing the long drawn-out issue to a close. It was a worthwhile experiment with vision, power, and potential. Many mothers claimed the baby when they did not simply ask for the child to be divided. It is essentially to torpedo that effort that SCACUF was born. Its founders were eager to ride the reinvigorated wave to whatever political power they perceived. There was no time to burnish and polish. The quick fix came in the form of a governing council transforming into the government with its leader sold as His Excellency the President. There was not stopping the mad rush. Before long, a full-fledged interim government decreed itself the only authority in the struggle. We spent months massaging egos, choking in self-delusions. We made excuses. At our own peril, we ignored calls to do what we would need to outsmart an enemy, well-connected and blindly protected by the notorious and nefarious French Republic. We engaged in political gamesmanship, sadly avoiding to strategize on how best to outdo the international conspiracy that holds Ambazonia hostage. We stretched ourselves thin, running down one rabbit hole after another, awaiting the next new fad. We likened ourselves to the David with a sling, praying that by sheer dint of luck, we too could bring down the Goliath. We forgot the exhortation of Jesus Christ, the greatest revolutionary leader, when he obliged revolutionaries to enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many. We hashed plans to humiliate leaders. We castigated and denigrated anyone who criticized or reminded that we are better than this. We preached unity while working to prevent it. We mortgaged the struggle to a few and sat back in the pious hope that the plane to Boya would be ready for us to board and take off. We replaced deliberation with demonization. In lieu of partnership, we practiced parochialism. We shut our ears to any alarm bells, proving the pidgin adage, who the see good luck gongambe. What is clear is that we cannot have it both ways. We cannot seek the intervention of the international community, yet refuse to play by the rules of the game known to the international community, unless this is all about chasing the wind. We have done some things right, of course. For example, we are not about to give up. We have accepted or resigned ourselves to sacrifice. In every domain, we appeared willing to accept and make sacrifices, except when it came to putting in place leadership. The Ambazonian independence restoration quest is laced with ironclad historical facts, anchored on rock-solid legal ground, but being executed from sandy foundations. We must return to the drawing board and marshal the resources to do not just what is convenient and pleasing to us, but also that which is necessary and sufficient. The stakes are very high, and the moment too ripe to pass off. If we, Ambazonians, can be so adept at stopping forthcoming presidential elections from holding in our homeland, recognizing that their tenure there would legitimize the recolonization from Yaoundé, why is it so difficult to understand that by not electing our own government, we are in effect making sure that we do not have a legitimate governing body, unless we consider strong men and women legitimate? Lambert, Mbom, Ambazonia Calling.
Stay tuned. Ambazonia Calling will be right back. with more news, analysis, commentary, opinion, and editorials. Massacres were ongoing all day Saturday in Biame and Kituvum in Bui State in Northern Zone. More than a dozen young men riding to Kituvum from Kumbo were arrested, ornaments tied around their wrist and or their waist by occupation forces in an effort to portray them as Amber Boys before they were summarily executed. Some of the parents of the victims have been so infuriated by the killings that they have taken up arms and have joined Amber Boys to try and overpower the colonial forces and defend their population. Top officers in Cameroon's armed and security forces are continuing to exploit the genocidal violence across Ambazonia to extort as much money from anyone believed to be or actually considered wealthy in Ambazonia. They are picking up Ambazonians who are considered affluent on false claims that they are funding terrorism. Here is Willibrod Ade with a look at what's going on.
When the government of Cameroon started a crackdown on so-called Anglophone activists by arresting the leaders of the consortium and the father of the Coffin Revolution, MANYU BBC, a new avenue for blackmailing the population was created for the forces of lawlessness and disorder. Uniformed thugs went around arresting people indiscriminately and using the threat of deportation to Yaoundé began extorting money from these individuals or their families. Young men were usually the target of this scheme as their families, for fear of seeing their sons whisked off to an unknown destination, had to do everything to raise the ransom money. Amounts as high as 1 million CFA have been paid to free some of these victims. Since Biya declared war on us, a different scheme involving kidnapping and extortion has emerged, with the difference that the perpetrators are not just the Cameroon vassals, but also fake Ambazonian freedom fighters. This is a very disturbing issue as it has the potential of derailing or even destroying the revolution if we don't nip it in the bud. Even though most of the groups doing this are fake Amber fighters sponsored by agents of colonial Cameroon, we have to acknowledge that in some cases, the perpetrators are genuine Ambazonian fighters gone rogue. In order to eradicate these disturbing acts, all self-defense groups need to have a clear chain of command. Educating the population on how to identify fake fighters will be very helpful. Finally, something they can also do is to reorganize themselves into active fighting units in charge of defending their communities against Cameroon marauders, and units whose primary mission will be to carry out police work in the community. Willibrod Ade for Ambazonia Calling.
Welcome to our special interview segment, The Devil Unmasked, The Truth Out. Welcome, Professor Emmanuel Tatamenta.
Thank you for having me so that we jointly dissect the rampant devil that is bypassing, undermining, or subverting the minds of many of our Ambazonian brothers and sisters through corruption and brutal force to subdue them.
Professor Tatamenta, Mr. Biya continues to misrepresent history in insisting on this is one and indivisible, whatever he calls it.
Ntumfoyn, I think it is obvious that there was never any unification of the Southern Cameroon, the Republic of Cameroon. That is very clear historically. I know that Biya and the rest of his demented folks are peddling an outline proposal for a draft constitution for a federal united Cameroon Republic signed in Yaoundé on the 14th of October 1960 by the late John Ntumfoyn and Amadou Ahidjo. Let me tell you, John Ntumfoyn had no right to sign any binding international treaty. Foreign affairs at the time and defense policies were under the control of the United Kingdom, not the Southern Cameroons under the Foncha administration. Such a document was never even presented to the Southern Cameroon Parliament for study, since it was illegal. In other words, Foncha had no business signing anything binding on the people of the Southern Cameroon back in October 1960, before the people even had the opportunity to vote, and without the authorizing administering authority, that is the United Kingdom. Paragraph 5 of the United Nations Resolution 1608, Articles 15 is crystal clear on the fact that the tripartite meeting set up by the UN General Assembly was to use the agreed and declared policies of the parties concerned. If Foncha and Ahidjo had signed a document earlier and Foncha kept it secret, it loses the binding validity by the UN directives to the three governments, the United Kingdom, French Cameroon, and Southern Cameroon, invited to the tripartite.
Who then is Mr. Biya referring to as Anglophones?
I think, Ntumfoyn, that Biya is referring felicitously to citizens of the British Southern Cameroon as Anglophones, a captive people of the Satanic Republic of Cameroon for more than half a century already. You would recall that the former UN Trust territory of French Cameroon acceded to independence on the 1st of January 1960. It did so under the name of République du Cameroun, translated as Cameroon Republic. It acceded to national independence on the 1st of January 1960 and was admitted to UN membership on the 20th of September 1960 within the territorial framework of the French trusteeship. Under the law, the frontiers of the Republic of Cameroon became frozen on that date of its accession to national independence. Their boundary had no maritime border with Nigeria at all. These are the critical legal issues that Biya's bribed acolytes at the United Nations like Secretary General Antonio Guterres and genocide watchdog Adama Dieng failed to grasp.
Does it simply mean that people don't understand, people in high places at the UN, at the African uselessness, as you call it?
But given the law on decolonization of trust territories and the phraseology of the plebiscite question, the independence of the British Southern Cameroon had to precede the Federal Free Political Association of the British Southern Cameroon and the Cameroon Republic. That is why UN Resolution 1608 of April 1961 endorsed the independence decision taken 2 months earlier during the plebiscite of 11th February. However, the UN fixed October 1, 1961 as the date when the following three occurrences were to take place. The first, the effective date of the independence of the British Southern Cameroon, which means the frontiers of the British Southern Cameroon became frozen on that date. The second, the date on which the federation was to come into being if the federal arrangement had by then become finalized, which was not finalized. And lastly, the date of the termination of the trusteeship and thus the end of the UK administration of the British Southern Cameroons.
What happened to the federation? Was Southern Cameroons and identity and nationality being exterminated?
Ntumfoyn, let me start by affirming that self-determination entails self-preservation. It does not entail self-destruction. Federation was conceived by the UN as a free political association of two independent states voluntarily submerging their sovereignties to form a new subject of international law called the Federal Republic of Cameroon, within which the two component states were to become federated states, had each to continue its political life according to the political culture and statecraft it had inherited. A federal society involves a dovetailing rather than a supersession of legal orders. Sovereignty is divided between the federation on the one hand and the federated states on the other. If the plebiscite had nothing to do with the independence of Southern Cameroon and was only about the British Southern Cameroon joining either of its two neighbors, then the phraseology of the plebiscite question would simply have been, do you wish to join? That situation would have been the case of a colonial territory joining an independent country. But that was not the case. It was, do you wish to gain independence by joining? The Free Political Association in gestation was still born when Cameroon Republic as a satanic system suddenly developed a consuming colonial appetite by laying claim to the British Southern Cameroon as part of its territory in egregious mockery of international law. This is the evidence of that delinquent behavior, that is the genocide we are living today. Though on 1st of September 1961, the British Southern Cameroon was a trust territory, Cameroon Republic enacted a so-called federal constitution supposedly binding on the British Southern Cameroons in disregard of international law principles of territoriality, which prohibits any state from exercising jurisdiction outside the area of its territory. That so-called federal constitution was actually in the nature of an annexation law, for the document claimed the British Southern Cameroons as part of the territory of Cameroon Republic returned to it. This is where the running dogs of African uselessness call it or got it all wrong. They do not read chanting slogans of African unity and Pan-Africanism, which they know nothing about its founding principles. Take, for example, Dr. Musa Faki Muhammad, the so-called chairman of the African Commission, chanting such nonsense because of his abysmal ignorance.
Where do we go from here?
The problem which you have, Ntumfoyn, is that of colonization and colonialism. There is one thing which is clear. No independence from colonization and colonialism can be attained with the force of argument alone. It must be a combination of both the argument of force and the force of argument. Though one may take precedence over the other at a given historical moment.
What word of advice would you give to Southern Cameroonians at this stage?
Yes, Ntumfoyn, my last word to Ambazonians is simple. Never give up on any of them. The argument of force and the force of argument must go together in any decolonization fight.
Thank you very much, Professor Tata Menta, and a very wonderful week to you.
Thank you.
Boy, they don't grind up people them for bath. If they come again, if they come again, then the people they need the year 12. Hey, but we go about food don't leave mark.
You have plenty of show yet to come, so don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Defections are dealing a very serious blow to the colonial army, the occupation forces of Dictator Biya. As the happy father of another newly born baby this week, Tanyi Jude Agwa Ozugen explains in this analysis.
Colonial Cameroon expected swift victory in the war it declared last November 30th against Ambazonia. Like America at the start of the war in Afghanistan, the colonizer promised shock and awe. The colonizer hoped for quick surgical operations against what at the time of the declaration of war was a non-existent Ambazonia Self-Defense Force. Trained by French, Israeli, and American special forces and equipped with state-of-the-art war gear from France, China, and the United States, the colonizer took victory for granted. After close to a year of grinding conflict with over 500 of their forces killed, according to Amber Boys, and at least 109 according to Yaoundé, the colonizer's confidence is badly shaken, its morale in tatters, and victory uncertain. Even with atrocity crimes, genocidal violence, and scorched earth practices, the elusive one and indivisible Cameroon is suffering widespread defections. Nearly 2,000 soldiers have defected or have been arrested and expected to be arraigned before the military tribunal for refusing to deploy to the war front. Even more worrying than the long line of defections, Yaoundé is frightened by the large-scale systematic breakdown in the execution of regime's orders. Commanding officers whose names have all been included on the list of officers flagged for investigation by the International Criminal Court are beginning to question the viability, risks, and potential costs of their actions. Scores of La République soldiers are in Chad, Nigeria, and the United States. One of the soldiers of the elite Rapid Reaction Battalion is currently battling it with the United States law enforcement officers in Minnesota for driving under the influence of alcohol. The high number of deaths has forced the regime in Yaoundé to launch the replacement of fallen soldiers. The bloodthirsty regime is seeking to recruit 2,600 ready-to-die so-called commandos. The regime no longer commands the corporations and obedience of its most important pillars of political and military support. Army commanders have no answer for the deadly daily ambushes by faceless Amber Boys. The block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood strategy is slowly but perceptibly bleeding the military into submission. The colonial army no longer has a soul, and without discipline, often a far more critical value than its military strength, it is only a matter of time before the colonizer finds itself where the Ethiopian army found itself in Eritrea. Angered by the gruesome human rights violations, soldiers are defying orders not to document and share the violations. In disregarding this order from Defense Minister Joseph Asomo, the soldiers have shown their scathing contempt and virulent hostility against the genocidal war. They are also driving home a silent and powerful message that they have mentally checked out from their command chain. It is only a matter of time before the colonizer bite the dust in Ambazonia. People fighting for and hungry for freedom don't lose wars. Yaoundé will soon learn that it waged a war against the wrong people. This is Jude Agua Ozugen for Ambazonia Calling.
We don't do foolish, but when there are capital fools out there, we make it our duty to find them, and every week we crown one of them the Nyamfuka of the week. Here is Veronique Vetimfe with the kings and queens of foolish.
An epic quarrel erupted online this week. Out of nowhere, insulting audio messages were plastered all over WhatsApp. In them, activists Mark Barra of Barreta News and Eric Tato of the National Telegraph newspaper go at each other with some colorful war of words. It was raging so much that in the good old primary school days, any student would have been forgiven for rushing to the teacher to report. Two big boys are fighting, sir. Mark and Eric are at each other's throat. What for? That is not clear. The two have plenty of attention paid to them already. Yet, it is hard not to think that they are seeking for notice. In these good-for-nothing insulting videos. For failing to hold back, for erupting in this epic war of words, comparable only to two aquarers fighting over a client. Activists Mark Barra and Eric Tato are this week co-third place finishers for the title of Nyamfuka of the week. Finishing in the position of runners-up this week is a foreigner, Jacques Ndongo of the Republic of Cameroon. This week, he went on Radio France International to do the only thing he knows how to do. He sang Hosanna to the tin god Biya, the man Ndongo calls his creator. The absentee dictator, he said, ought to win reselection, not election, come next October 7, on the basis of what he described as eloquent list of achievements. Speaking on behalf of the nowhere-to-be-found cadaver candidate of the CPDM gang of criminals in power, Ndongo said Paul Biya needs another 7-year term to build infrastructure, modernize agriculture, advance social justice, preserve peace, and what he called national unity. Asked if the ongoing war in the Cameroons isn't the greatest proof that Dictator Biya has failed, Ndongo, with a straight face, said there is no crisis in the Cameroons. Cameroon is up and running, he claimed. He described Ambazonians seeking independence as highway robbers, rapists, arsonists, and looters, for reconfirming this week that he is still the fool he was the last time we checked. Jacques Ndongo is this week's runners-up for the Nyamfuka of the week. Winning the crown absolutely hands down this week is a pair of Ambazonia-born colonial supporters who this week played amateur pranksters in the film they were quick to title The London Bridge Has Fallen. The duo, led by Pierre Brian Zelle, littered WhatsApp with video showing them assault Dr. Lucas Cho Ayaba of the AGC as he arrived in London, reportedly to sign an oil deal. In additional video, the two amateur pranksters only proved how dull they are at putting together a prank that would even come close to staining Cho Ayaba. Anyone with brains would have known that to prove greed or an attempt to sabotage the revolution or enrich oneself instead of advancing the revolution, all they needed was to invite Dr. Cho Ayaba to seal a deal that benefits him personally or his family at the expense of the revolution. If they had any brains, they would have tried to prove that Cho Ayaba would take money from CPDM vampires in order to betray the revolution. For having brains the size of a chicken and showing themselves unable to put together a simple prank, the London duo, led by a peer, Brian Zelle, are this week's undisputable winners of the crown of shame, the Nyamfuka of the week. Veronique Vertimfe for Ambazonia Calling.
Ambazonia Calling. You are in the heart of the news shrine. Call us the Kalakuta Republic of commentary, opinion, and editorials. The colonial regime of Mr. Biya is not giving up. They're shopping around for some really high prizes. They're looking for some heads that they would like to pick up in a prisoner exchange. We got some details. They are juicy, and they're brought to you by Innocentia.
Yaoundé is offering the United States of America a prisoner exchange for the heads of Herbert, Ivo Tapang, Samuel Sako, and other Ambazonian leaders within North America, our intelligence sources say. The offer comes on the heels of a search, capture, and return mission undertaken by U.S. law enforcement agents who are currently in Cameroon seeking the repatriation of a convicted U.S. person of interest who went into hiding in Cameroon. Led by La République du Cameroon's Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji, Ambazonia Calling sources say the Cameroonese delegation initially asked for the repatriation of some former ministers who are in hiding in the United States. Topmost in their list, another source confirmed, is the one-time Minister of Agriculture. Shortly after he was let go from Biya's cabinet, he obtained a visa with the blessing of President Biya to go out for treatment in France. It is while in France that he made it out to the United States, from where he has become an ardent critic of the system that he once served. Paul Atanganji's proposition never made headway, Ambazonia Calling has decoded, because the Biya Isingan rejected the hanging of their own, instead offering to exchange the prisoner for the heads of Herbert, Ivo Tapang, Samuel Sako, and some other U.S. resident Ambazonian leaders. Whereas there is no extradition treaty between the United States and Cameroon, there is precedence where the United States swooped into the Banana Republic and ferried out Mrs. Terry Mubang, a U.S. naturalized citizen who had committed Medicaid fraud and fled to Cameroon. In that instance, the operation was over even before La République du Cameroon knew what was happening. The difference between that case and this case, we have learned, is that the U.S. person of interest in this case has been in the custody of Cameroon's security apparatus. A $10,000 bounty offered by the U.S. had led to their hideout. However this case plays out at Ambazonia Calling, we are confident Cameroon will not cause the U.S. to stoop to its rogue state status. But these leaders better beware and take necessary precaution. NERA happened without any extradition treaty with Nigeria. You can never bet on the corrupting power of money. Innocentia, Ambazonia Calling.
For more stories from around the world, go to the World Wide Web at themissionstribune.com, compassfreepress.com, and africafreedomnetwork.com.
Earlier in this broadcast, we heard Chief Barrister Charles Taku of the International Criminal Court state how embarrassed he is that the United Nations has been silent in the face of the genocide unfolding in Ambazonia. 10 days ago at the funeral of the former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan in Ghana, current UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres did not only pay homage to his fallen peer, he revealed the kind of diplomacy he practices, describing it as the diplomacy of silence, and I'm tempted to add, the diplomacy of criminal silence. Here's Antonio Guterres speaking in Accra.
There is an old joke. The art of diplomacy is to say nothing, especially when you are speaking.
Indeed, maintaining criminal silence. That is exactly how Antonio Guterres has been behaving as genocide unfolds in Ambazonia. When he's not busy censoring media and investigative journalists like Matthew Lee of Inner City Press, he is just sealing his lips. Antonio Guterres recognized Kofi Annan for the partnership he formed with him at the time when, as a minister from Portugal, he worked with Kofi Annan to bring about a peaceful solution to the self-determination quest in Timor-Leste.
When the people of Timor-Leste were seeking self-determination, we worked together, he from the United Nations and I from Portugal, to support the peaceful resolution of their plight.
But the current Secretary General does not understand what it takes to bring about a peaceful resolution in Ambazonia. Even as Guterres applauds Kofi Annan for taking care of the most vulnerable, such as refugees, Guterres is unable to offer the same kind of protection for refugees such as Ambazonian refugees from cross-border genocidal raids in Nigeria.
When the UN Refugee Agency needed new leadership, Kofi blessed me with his trust in asking me to fill that role and then provided unwavering support to protect and shelter the most vulnerable of the vulnerable.
Given a chance to look back at Kofi Annan's career, Guterres recognized the true enemy of peace-loving people around the globe. It is, he says, indifference in the face of suffering by millions.
To him, indifference was the world's worst poison.
Guterres recognized during that tribute to Kofi Annan that enormous power is invested in the person of the Secretary General of the world body.
Kofi Annan was the United Nations, and the United Nations was him.
After failing the people of Rwanda during the 1994 genocide, as well as the people of Bosnia during the 1995 massacres of over 7,000 people, Kofi Annan could not help admitting his failure during an interview on Hard Talk broadcast by the BBC.
It failed the people of Rwanda, didn't it?
No, you can argue that we failed the people of Uganda, we failed Rwanda, and we failed the people of Bosnia, as you mentioned earlier.
One other admission Kofi Annan made on that program was to the fact that part of the failure may have been because the people being killed and massacred were blacks.
Jan Egeland, the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council, says the Democratic Republic of the Congo is one of the worst crises on earth, yet no one seems to care about it. Yeah. Is he right? And why do you think it doesn't count? Is it because they're Africans?
There could be a part of that.
Even as Kofi Annan admitted guilt, the failure of the United Nations to intervene to protect lives, listen how he tried cleverly to find another excuse, which Guterres may use one day to say the United Nations did not want to walk into a trap.
I have to ask you, there were numerous warnings from people on the ground in Rwanda. You must have received at least 10 warnings. For example, General Romeo Dallaire, head of the UN peacekeeping mission in Rwanda, in November 1993, alerted you to the possibility of what might happen, and yet you got no response.
I think, first of all, Romeo Dallaire is a good friend and a very good officer. Romeo Dallaire, when he sent that message to my military advisor, indicated that it is also possible that it is a trap, that they could walk into a trap with this warning.
Fully aware of how badly he, as an African, and the United Nations had failed fellow Africans in Rwanda, Kofi Annan worked extremely hard to put in place an instrument that Antonio Guterres, if he was truly serious about preventing genocide, would have used to intervene in the Cameroons.
No, all of us who worked in that period were really shattered by the experience. And that's why I pushed for the approval of responsibility to protect. Because that concept of responsibility to protect, which states that if a country is not in a position or unwilling to protect its population, the international community has a responsibility to go in, because before then, you can say this is a question of sovereignty. We have not been invited.
Faced with overwhelming evidence that the United Nations failed the people of Rwanda, Kofi Annan continued to argue that the UN was helpless. The word he uses, helpless.
I don't think we acquiesced, but we were helpless.
Listen to that, helpless. This is the kind of line that Guterres is no doubt waiting to use tomorrow to try to deflect blame.
I don't think we acquiesced, but we were helpless. If you use the word acquiesce, you are implying that the 2,500 troops there could have stopped the genocide.
It may be hard tomorrow, but not impossible, for Guterres to evoke exactly the same excuses, although everyone must be embarrassed by the fact that he accepted golden statue for the golden silence he now observes, although it might be more difficult to explain those reports indicating that the Secretary General of the United Nations wants to use his good offices to cover up for genocide. As in the case of the Tutsi people of Rwanda, the people of Ambazonia must count on themselves more than anyone else for protection. As an American leader once told his fellow compatriots, there is nothing to fear except fear itself. For Ambazonians, there is nothing to fear, not even fear itself. Ambazonians will live free or die. The world must give them freedom or give them death.
This is Ambazonia Calling.
It is impossible to obtain political independence without also obtaining financial independence. As a matter of fact, seek ye first the financial kingdom, and all the others will be added unto you. 14 African countries did not do that in the 1960s, and Ambazonia had the misfortune of being attached to one of them. It's time now, as we think about independence, to begin to think about our own currency. And here is the tribal monk.
Puncturing the money myth. On July 5th, 2018, in Lagos, Nigeria, the French President Macron, speaking to a mostly Nigerian audience, had this to say about the CFA franc.
And I have to say, some countries of ECOWAS, have a currency closely linked to euro, and especially the old franc, français, the franc CFA. And I told them, I think if you want to change that, I'm ready to do so. I'm open.
Born in 1945.
Critics say the common currency has hampered the region's economic growth, while France profits.
Reason: the weakness of the French franc immediately after World War II. Remember Bretton Woods Agreement? The French franc was devalued in order to set a fixed exchange rate with the US dollar. This is 1945. New currencies were created in the French colonies to spare them the strong devaluation. French officials presented the decision as an act of generosity.
I think that the CFA franc represents a currency for monkeys. It's a metaphor to say that it's a currency that does not represent us. We are still seen as monkeys, as animals. It's not a currency that represents our economies. I think that today it is very important to reclaim ourselves. Some credit the French-backed common currency with fostering stability. Others decry it as a colonial hangover.
René Plevin, the French Minister of Finance at that time, was quoted as saying, "In a show of her generosity and selflessness, metropolitan France, wishing not to impose on her faraway daughters the consequences of her own poverty, is setting different exchange rates for their currency." Question: what has Ambazonia, which is not a former French colony, got to do with the franc CFA? As Ambazonia rumbles on the road to freedom, citizens worried about money have legitimate concerns. What is going to happen to my stash of CFAs? First of all, we have no banks or treasuries operating on the territory under the control of Ambazonians. So where do I save, loan, and or borrow money? What happens to my business? How do I pay my workers? How do I pay myself? All legitimate questions. As long as 8 million citizens have made the decision to free themselves from 56 years of bondage, to establish, rebuild their own state, nation, the question of money is as important as the air of freedom we all will be breathing. This is the tribal monk from Ibalikumato, Vadrukov himself, for Ambazonia Calling.
Here is our letter to Joshua.
Dear Joshua, the world is about to fall on your head. That is what happens to anyone who hangs on to power forever. Ask Big Brother Bob Mugabe. A once grateful nation stops chanting Toujours Shoga when they realize all you once had were the looks, nothing else, no brains, no love, no compassion, no patriotism. They vomit you, Joshua. They join the military with the tanks out in the street, dancing and spitting on your grave even before one has been dug. Sad for the Banana Republic you have misruled for 36 years. Good for you to have lived on and abused the public dime and the privilege of public service all your life. Or is it 3 lives you have had? I mean, you have been clinging on to power long enough for a cat to die all 9 lives and live twice. The trouble is what these fellows at the International Criminal Court are now beginning to say very loudly. Did you hear the prosecutor of the court, Chief Barrister Charles Taku? He declared from Kampala, Uganda, that the